As a matter of fact, I give you some bonus content on Gilbert because I mean, you got to pay attention to it. No matter what the conversation is going, he's going to try to turn it to some of the new school or LeBron, I don't know, superiority, right? He's going to try to make the new school and LeBron seem superior to old school and Michael Jordan, right? Here's another conversation, and somebody shared this in on the Facebook group on Man Down. Go check out Man Down Facebook group. But they shared this and they tagged me, and they thought they asked me what do I think about it, and I was like, you know what, I might tell you what I think about it. But here's Gilbert Arenas trying to do that same trick, and here's how it turned out. This is how it sounded.
Gary Payton, first 4 years in the league, he was shooting 20%. He shot 125 threes. They moved the line 2 feet. He shot 915 threes in the next 3 years.
Whoa.
This is when I knew they needed scoring. They were just holding the ball. They couldn't,
That's big time.
man,
That's wild, bro.
all right, if you're a defensive player and someone yanks you every single time down the court, how are you awarded defense? Yeah, because he can't shoot now.
Yeah.
How much did you average in the 90s?
In the 90s?
Yeah.
100. There's only one and a half scorers on every team. So when you're talking about the Bulls, all the balls just went to Michael Jordan. So he's taking all the shots. So if you're telling me that I'm taking all the shots with my skill set and these guards with 28-inch vertical, what am I dealing with here? Gary?
So here you go again. And what he said to some people sounds profound. It sounds great, right? But then when it doesn't withstand the smallest amount of scrutiny, right? It doesn't withstand. So let's start with first of all, he's all over the place because what his premise is also giving credit to how good the defense was in the 90s, right? So he's saying he's at the same time he's saying the defense was so good they had to move the 3-point line in 2 feet so they can get more scoring. But then at the same time he's also saying the defense was horrible, which is weird. So he's saying the defense was horrible. He would have averaged 100. He was saying that, he don't even know what he's trying to say, and the people that's listening don't know what he's trying to say, because at the same time he's saying scoring would have been easy because they only had one scorer per team. He said 1.5. So a star and a co-star, and that's where you get your points from. And there was a lot of defense, and they held the ball a lot. It was a slow pace. They didn't shoot a lot of threes, all that stuff, right? So, and this was something the NBA was tracking because they had a 10-year span where scoring was dipping, right? So if you a perfect world, a balance of offense would be here and defense would be here. You want it to be even. You don't want to give one advantage over the other. You want enough offense and enough defense because that's both part of basketball. We want to see both, right? So I think the NBA was saying that the defense was so good that scoring was continually declining every year for the last 10 years. And they was trying to figure out ways to get more scoring. Like as far as they look at the final score and it's 75 to 78, that's the final score. And they was like, well, we want the scores to be in the hundreds. What do we need to do? Well, maybe if they hit more threes, they thought it would do a couple of things. And you can Google this. Rob Thorne was making these decisions at the time for the NBA. And he was on record before they made the change telling them that they was monitoring the decline in scoring every year for the last 10 years, and they wanted to get more scoring in the NBA. That's why they moved the 3-point line. Gilbert Arenas won't tell you that part, right? So they moved the 3-point line because they wanted more or higher scoring for the NBA because they felt scoring was exciting for ratings, and people want to see scoring more than they want to see defensive battles, right? And that goes across all sports. Right. So they said, man, move the 3-point line 2 feet in it was 23.9 inches, 23 feet, 9 inches, and they moved it to 22 feet. Right. So the corners are always the short threes. The corners are at 22 feet already, but around the arc, was 23, and the top of the key was probably, it was 23, right? So they moved it in where the arc was a little closer. So the arc was the same as the corner. The arc was 22. So the corners and the arc are 22, but I think the top of the key might have still been 23.9. I had to double check that, but you can Google this. These are facts, right? So they experimented that way for three years, and yes, Michael Jordan's 3-point percentage went up. So did Steve Kerr's. I think he shot 50% from three. So he had the record for a while until Kyle Korver broke it. And the example he used of Gary Payton, saying that the first 4 years he was in the league, he shot 20%, which is true. He was a horrible shooter. He shot bad everywhere. He shot 50% within that 4-year span. He shot 50% from the free throw line one time. Right. So he was never a good shooter. And you can tell by his shot mechanics, even when he became a decent shooter, you can tell by his shot mechanics that this was work. It took time for him to become that. Same with Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd was not a good shooter. People would let him shoot threes all day long. By the time he got, I'll say, to Phoenix, maybe, he started knocking them down. And that definitely when he got older, he was a really good 3-point shooter. His last couple of years and with the Knicks and the championship year he won with the Dallas Mavericks, he was a really good 3-point shooter. But we know the history of J. Kidd. He came in the league not being able to shoot. Same with same with Gary Payton. So even if they didn't move the 3-point line, like what Gary Payton is trying to, all right, so he's trying to use the premise of the 3-point line being moved was because people couldn't score. But he won't say why they couldn't score because the defense was good. Right? He's not gonna say that, but that's what it was. That they played good defense, and it was hard to score. It was a physical game. So he's trying to say that they moved the 3-point line because people couldn't shoot, and there was not enough scorers on the team, so they tried to help him out. Right? And then he's trying to connect that to Gary Payton's progression as a shooter. You come in as a rookie and you got 4 years. Most rookies don't shoot their best when they first come in, unless you're a really, really good shooter. But most people who just can't shoot, like Gary Payton couldn't shoot, and you come in the league, your first 4 years is probably going to be your worst shooting years. So naturally, after year 4, your shot mechanics should be better, and your percentage should be higher, which it was. So if you want to credit the 3-point line being moved to why Gary Payton started knocking down threes, you can. But what you don't get allowed to do is once they move the 3-point line back to its original spot 3 years later, if it was true that Gary Payton was benefited just by the 3-point line being moved closer, then you would expect to see his numbers and percentages drop once they move it back to the original spot. And they didn't. They continued to get better. So his Gary Payton's example and trying to use that to back what the point he was trying to make, that already fell by the wayside. The Gary Payton thing is gone. You bad your first 4 years as a shooter, they move the 3-point line, then you get better at shooting, then they move the 3-point line back to the original spot and you still get better at shooting. That shows me that Gary Payton was actually working on his shot regardless of what the 3-point line was at, and he was getting better with his shot every year. The 3-point line probably, if it did benefit him by getting closer, it wasn't like what he was saying where it was like the sole purpose why his percentages went up. If that was the case, they would have went back down when they moved it back to the original spot. So that's the first thing. The second thing, is then now let me bring it to Michael Jordan. He had to bring it to Michael Jordan some type of way, and try to say, they only had 1.5 scores on the team. So they was going to Michael Jordan for all the points. If I'm going to one guy for all the points, then obviously that means I don't even know what point he's trying to make, to be honest with you. Like what was he trying to say with this Michael Jordan thing? That's how it gets weird. Like I just told you in the first clip, the conversation was about KD being better than LeBron James, and then he took it to how this means something about Jordan. and start talking about Jordan Chicago. I just don't understand how all roads lead to Jordan in these conversations, and he tried to make a point off of that, right? So he wants people to really believe Michael Jordan was not as great as a scorer as that we know he was, and he tries to find anything to try to discredit him as a scorer. And then like he's saying that he would have scored 100 in this era, you know. So I guess he think that because if Michael Jordan was the best scorer in the 90s, right, and Gilbert Arenas was a good scorer in the 2000s, I guess he's saying if he would have went to the 90s, he would have been a better scorer than Michael Jordan. That's basically what he's saying. If Michael Jordan averaged 35, 40, and he's saying he would have averaged 100, like Wilt was saying, that Wilt didn't even do that in the 60s. He's saying that he would have went and would have been more dominant in the 90s than Wilt was in the 60s. That's basically what he's saying. And you know, I know he's being facetious because he's not going to average 100, but he's saying he would destroy. And you know, it's so easy. That's why I'm glad Kobe existed, and I'm glad he was so close to Michael Jordan, because you get to see what Jordan would have looked like and more, because we do all acknowledge that Michael Jordan is better than Kobe. If Kobe is exactly like Michael Jordan but a little bit less, and he dominated the 2000s, you can't possibly think that Michael Jordan wouldn't also dominate and dominate in a bigger way than what Kobe did. And if Gilbert Arenas couldn't outscore Kobe in his era, then what make him think he would outscore Michael Jordan in his era? It just don't make sense. But that's Gilbert for you. That's how he do it. That's how he do his stuff, man. But you got to be able to decipher that.